Good afternoon, everybody. This is Hunter Mozingo bringing you your daily market insight video here on Monday, April 4th, nearly 10 minutes after market close here in Jacksonville, Florida, 4:09 p.m. Eastern Time. And today we saw big tech really lead the markets. Buyers were coming after the big tech names right out of the gate. And so we're going to look at that as well as the three trades that we made today in Grotection for the portfolio. So we're going to dive into those a little bit. Like I said, big tech really leading today, more or less right out of the gate. We saw the big time strength in names like Apple and Microsoft and Amazon and Tesla and so on. So we're going to get to those charts and we're going to get to the trades we made today in the portfolio. But first, let's talk about the performance quickly here. G6 up about 1.3, S&P up 0.8. The Q's the big leader of the day. Like I said, big tech leading up 2.06%. Dow Jones Industrial Average up 0.3. Mid caps the laggard today, down 0.25%. Russell 2000 slightly green, up about 0.25%. 60/40 up a little over 0.6, and Grotection up about 0.8 or 0.4% today. So moving along here, market state remains an uptrend. Nothing has happened that would cause us to change this for the time being. Trend gauge, we've got some moderate changes to the small sub arrows. So we had the small yellow arrow here pointing towards neutral for leaders with some bad action today. A lot of that was corrected, for lack of a better term. A lot of those leading stocks that were suffering or showing some bad signs to end last week end up having a really nice bounce today. A lot of leading stocks and decent setups out there in the market, and some nice action today, some good price action across the board. So small change there, move that yellow arrow, took it off, put the small black arrow here under market leaders, and then same concept here with long term. As far as moving this back over, as we've got the S&P still above the 200. We saw some bounces across the board on the major indices. So move this from the small yellow arrow to the small black neutral arrow here under long term. So no major changes. This still remains the same. Market leaders short term and medium bullish, long term still neutral, still kind of in a wait and see mode to see if the Qs and the other indices can catch up with the S&P, get back above that 200-day moving average. So before we go to the charts, as I do always here, let me reference Revere and myself just for a quick moment. This is me in the middle here. If you have any questions, send me an email, hunter@revereasset.com. I'll happily answer any questions you may have. Whatever the case may be, don't hesitate to contact me. If you're interested in what we do at Revere, what our strategy is, etc., you can email me or anybody here, Merrill, Dan, Tim, or Don at revereasset.com as well. So let's get right into the tail of the tape here before we get to the charts, and we'll move through this quickly. I've got the S&P up over here on the right side of my screen. So you see the two strong days here, nice strong finish. Let me pull that back up. I apologize there. Nice strong finish on Friday, even though it came really out of nowhere right at the end of the day, and then nice follow through today. So let's get into it. As we said a moment ago, market state still an uptrend, and these headwinds continue to remain. Inflation, Fed taper, interest rates, Russia, Ukraine, all of this still kind of hanging over the head of the market, particularly interest rates and what the Fed may or may not do coming into focus relatively soon here. But all of these still remain as the headwinds driving the market or hanging over the market. Sentiment wise, put call continues to kind of fluctuate more or less between 0.8 and 1. But today on the low end of that range, down at that 0.8, which kind of seems to be the new lower area. So 0.7 to 0.8, kind of the lowish end of the put call ratio, at least for this year. But it's kind of still staying depressed. We're seeing the moving averages continue to kind of angle downward here on the put call ratio. VIX also moved down today after it popped its head back over 20 last week, back sub 20 to 1850 here, and then fear greed still the same, right in the middle at about a neutral. So bull case, as you can see on the right side of the screen, we reclaimed the moving averages and we're staying above them. So all of this is still intact. A failure would be a break of these moving averages, a break of these key levels here, that type of thing, right? So, but for the time being, the rally is still intact. So news today, not really anything super noteworthy. However, Elon Musk it did come out that he took a stake in Twitter over the course of the last week or two. I believe a 9% stake. So that had Twitter stock jumping in the pre-market. We're going to look at that in just a moment. What were we watching today? What would the S&P and the Qs do versus these lows from Friday? We wanted to make sure they could hold those lows, but the reality is we moved higher right out of the gate and we stayed above, got back above the 8-day, so really didn't even come close to testing the lows from Friday. More or less opened up kind of flat to green and really kind of just continued to move higher throughout the day, as evidenced by the action here. So opened up about 0.1% higher. Initial move, we ended up spiking higher around 10 o'clock-ish on Eastern time, and then more or less trended up for the rest of the day and closed right on the highs of the day for the S&P. So really strong action across the board. A lot of sectors that were struggling early ended up recovering. So we'll get into that in a moment too, but a really nice day for the S&P and for the Qs today in particular. So notes wise, lots of attractive setups. I kind of mentioned that a second ago. And the QQQ top holding strong. That's that big tech that was really carrying the Qs and boosting the S&P today. So S&P opened up 0.1%, closed up 0.4%, or 0.8. G6 up about 1.3, 6040 up 0.64, Grotection up about 0.8. Sector wise, this is really important here. XLC, XLK, XLY really strong all day long. And this is communications, technology, discretionary. These are the sectors that have been beaten up. These are the sectors that people have not wanted to own over the last 3 months. And those are the sectors that were strong and stayed strong all day long. We also had oil bounce. That is your actual oil, your USO there. TAN strong today, SOX strong today. That's your semiconductors, which really had a rough week last week, and software. So a lot of the risk on stuff is really where you saw the strength today. And then conversely, the risk off stuff is where the weakness was, right? So this is industrials, staples, utilities, healthcare. These were kind of struggling today. Gold miners, banks, and the shipping stocks, all some of the worst performing of the sectors today. Portfolio wise, we did increase our beta, as you can see, from 0.96 to 1.22. We bought QLD, which is essentially, it is a leverage product on the Qs. So we added some QQQ exposure. We added to Tesla and we added to MP. So these were two existing positions. This was the new buy. We're going to look at that in just a second. Bottom line from today, I've kind of said it already, but big tech leads the bounce after a brief pullback on the indices, right? So here's the brief pullback, here's the bounce, and big tech really leading today. So moving on quickly here, today's close 45.82, strong day, big tech leads, closed right at the highs of the day. We're also seeing the 50-day moving average clearly start to hook up here, 44.16, that's your rising 50-day. We've got 44.75, that's your rising 21 EMA. So you got the 21 trying to get back through the 200. That should happen in the next day or two, as long as the S&P can stay in this range above 4,500. And you got the 50 starting to hook up a little bit as well. So some positive things going for the market, and let's get into it and let's talk about it in a little more detail. So like I said, this is the S&P here, closing right near the highs of the day, getting right back above the 8-day after a brief dip back down to this 4,500 level, which it appears so far is offering great support. So this 4,500 level or Friday's low, which is 45.07, pay really close attention to that. It's a big spot. If we come back to those levels, we want to see what happens here at this 4,500 level. Big point of interest on the S&P. Moving on to the Qs here, I mentioned very strong today, lifted by big tech. You can see a 3-day pullback here on the Qs right to the 8-day, never closed below it, and then a really strong move up today right into this 200-day moving average. So the obvious pivot everyone's going to be paying attention to here is this 371.83 high from the 29th. If that gets taken out, that might add some juice to the trade, but that's only about 1.5%, or about 0.5%, excuse me, from where we closed today. So although the Qs had this 3-day pullback, they make up for it real quick and get right back close to where they were at the highs in a 1 day's time here. Continuing on, IWM, a laggard today, but continuing to trend higher. As you can see here, oils really weren't the greatest today. We know that tends to be a lagging impact on small caps there. Mid caps similarly lagging today, but really nothing wrong here. Staying above the 21. You want to see it get back above the 200-day. You want to see mid caps reclaim this 500 level. It's a really big psychological spot for this. You can see it's tried, it's been resistance. This 500 level is a big spot for the mid caps. And then DIA, the Dow, Also a laggard today, but same story, just continuing to kind of trend higher here along the 21 EMA. Although it's lagging a little bit here and you see the RS line, still kind of doing what you need it to do. So major indices finding support where they should, and for the most part, looking pretty decent at the time being. So let's get into our buys. So I already mentioned we bought QLD, which is just a leverage product here on the Q. So we added some QQQ exposure to the portfolio on this strong action early this morning as it stayed above the 8, never even came close to retesting these lows from Friday. So we added some QQQ exposure, and then we added to a name that most people are going to be familiar with here called Tesla. So we increased our Tesla exposure, was an existing position, added to it, and you can see this is a really strong breakout out of this consolidation here. So more or less, Tesla went sideways until the 8 EMA caught up, and then boom, you get a 6% update today, clearing the highs of this consolidation, and now only within striking distance of possibly making it to this 1200 level. So we added to Tesla today. Another name we added to today, MP, another name that continues to act like a leader. This one in the mining and metal space. We had a small add to this name here as well as it continues to digest this move. You see these skyscraper type of blue volume bars here. There's some big volume, big accumulation going on in this name. So a small add to MP, we added a Tesla, and we added some QQQ exposure. So those are the trades that we did in Grotection today. Now let's get on to the stocks. I mentioned big tech leads, so let's take a look at the big tech names, right? Nvidia up 2.5% nearly today after a really nasty close to the week last week. It looks as though Nvidia is right back above the 8-day and might could be right back to the races. But Nvidia up about 2.5% today. Microsoft also up about 2% today. Very similar pattern to the Qs in the sense that we had a small pullback and then really quickly we're right back within striking distance of those recent highs. So big tech really, really looking good today, really strong. They were buying right out of the gate, like I said. Apple, another name, up about 2.5%. Amazon, another big tech name, also strong today. And I believe the one that I haven't shown is Google, which was up about the same as the others, roughly 2% here. So big tech, really strong, really lifting the market today. And there's the charts themselves, so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Every single one of these charts, big time outperforming the S&P and all the other indices today, but for the most part, right about in line with what the Qs did today. So just a couple of individual names here that I want to highlight. One semiconductor name that's less talked about than most of the others, but MRVL, this is Marvell. I like the way this came back and bounced off that 50, got back above the 21 and reclaimed the 8 here. Some decent volume patterns in the last couple of weeks here on MRVL as well. Just depends on whether or not the semiconductor space can kind of get itself together and start moving along with the market after a tough week last week. And then I mentioned Twitter up huge on the Elon Musk announcement. As you can see, up almost 30% today, right at this 50 level, which is a big psychological level. But nonetheless, this volume on Twitter, call it the Elon Musk effect, whatever you want to call it. This is something you got to take notice of here. I don't know what's going to happen with this, but this is a big time changing character. And obviously the volume reflects that something is going on here. So let's move on to some of the laggards from the day quickly here. Agco, a name that we're watching really closely because it's got some big time volume here as it's moved up the right side of its base, down about 1.5% today, as industrials was a little bit weak in general for the most part. But Agco, one of the names that we're watching closely, weak today. Excuse me. A few more here. GDX, I mentioned a lot of the sectors that had been strong, not so strong today, like utilities, staples. GDX is a good example here. Newmont, one of the top names in this group, down about 2% today. So these names ended up coming back in a little bit today. Mentioned the shippers really having a tough day. ZIM and most of these other shipper companies all down anywhere from 5 to 7% more or less today. So the shippers having a tough go of it. Oil names, most of them initially were strong and ended up reversing and being weak. So this is Matador. I'm going to show you a 5-minute here. So initial strength and really nasty reversal. Matador, one of the has been one of the stronger oil stocks this year, very volatile, and this is a good example of that. But some nasty reversals out in oil land here, and I'll show you a couple more examples just so you can kind of see what I mean. Most other names much more contained. But as you can see, here's DVN spiked up to 62 in the morning and then came all the way back to 60. So a lot of the oil names have a very similar pattern to what you saw there. They finished off the lows, but some nasty reversals, at least in the first part of this morning, on a lot of the oil names there. So a couple more laggards, and then we will wrap this video up. LNTH just down about 3% today. This one very, very volatile, but still kind of hanging out and consolidating in this range here. Had a big increase in guidance, big move on this EPS. One worth watching, but also one that's very risky and very illiquid. A couple more here. Costco, as I mentioned, staples were lagging today, which leads Costco to probably most likely lag a little bit as well. So Costco just basically flat today, not really doing anything absurd. And I do want to cover these sectors really quick because I don't think I brought them up. I think I skipped over this. So we're going to go back to the positive side of things here. This is XLK, the technology sector ETF. You see this strong move here. We're going to pull up XLC. Similar move, very strong. And then lastly, XLY, consumer discretionary, also making a strong move today. So strong moves from the risk on type of sectors, especially, and these are the more risk on like big cap sectors too. These are the ETFs that have your Apples, your Microsofts, your Googles, your Amazons, Apples, and so on. So these sectors were really strong today. The ones that were not so strong were the ones like utilities, the ones like staples, even banks, things of that nature were some of the laggards today. So that is going to wrap up today's video, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope it was valuable. If you have any questions, please send me an email. I'll happily respond, but I will see you all on Thursday's video and the podcast this week. So have a great week, everybody.